Leon, please, come home. We can fix this.
You taught me love. I taught you fear.
The smell of garlic and basil filled my nostrils as I walked into the Rossi family home, carrying a bottle of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Sunday dinners at Francesca's parents' house were a ritual I'd endured for 15 years of marriage, sitting at the edge of conversations conducted in rapid Italian, while I smiled and nodded like a trained seal. Leon. Francesca's mother, Maria, embraced me with the enthusiasm she reserved for tax audits. How nice you could make it. The passive-aggressive dig wasn't lost on me. I'd been working late most Sundays, trying to build my IT consulting business while Francesca climbed the ladder at her immigration law firm. But tonight was different. Tonight, I had a surprise that would change everything. Francesca swept into the dining room wearing a black dress that hugged her curves perfectly. At 44, she was still stunning. The kind of woman who turned heads at restaurants and made other men wonder how a guy like me had gotten so lucky. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, and her lips were painted the deep red that had first caught my attention at a college party 20 years ago. "Sorry I'm late," she said, not looking at me. "Client emergency." Another client emergency. They seemed to happen a lot lately, especially on weekends, especially when they required her to dress like she was going to a nightclub instead of an office. Her father, Giuseppe, carved the roast with theatrical precision while launching into his usual complaints about Canadian politics. Francesca's younger sister, Sophia, listened politely, occasionally glancing at me with what looked like sympathy. The conversation flowed around me in Italian, as always, leaving me to focus on my food and wine. Then Francesca's cousin Marco arrived with his wife and kids, and the real show began. "Leon still doesn't speak Italian?" Marco asked in English, his voice dripping with mock concern. 15 years married to our Francesca, and he can't even order pizza properly." The table erupted in laughter. Francesca smiled, that tight smile she used when she was embarrassed by me in public. "He's tried," she said diplomatically, "but some people just don't have an ear for languages." "It's not that hard," added her brother Tony, switching to Italian. "Even my 8-year-old speaks better Italian than most Canadians." More laughter. I took a sip of wine and waited. Giuseppe launched into one of his stories about the old country, gesturing wildly with his fork. The family hung on every word, occasionally adding their own commentary. Then Francesca chimed in with a joke that made everyone howl with laughter. "Leon is like a convenient Canadian husband," she said in Italian, her voice carrying that musical quality it only had when she spoke her native language. "He provides the citizenship and the steady income, but he's basically furniture, very useful furniture that pays taxes and fixes the Wi-Fi." The laughter was louder this time. Even Sophia giggled behind her napkin. Giuseppe raised his wine glass in a mock toast. "To useful furniture," he declared. They were all looking at me, waiting for my usual confused smile and shrug. Instead, I set down my wine glass and looked directly at Francesca. "Almeno questo mobile parla due lingue," I said clearly. "At least this piece of furniture speaks 2 languages." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the wall clock ticking. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Giuseppe's wine glass froze in midair. Francesca's face went white, then red, then white again. I continued in perfect Italian, my accent carrying just a hint of the northern dialect I'd been practicing with YouTube videos and language apps for the past 3 years. "And this furniture has been listening to every word you've said for quite some time now, including the conversations you thought were private." Maria dropped her fork. The clatter echoed in the stunned silence. "You speak Italian?" Sophia whispered in English, as if speaking too loudly might break whatever spell had been cast. "Fluently," I replied, switching back to English. Turns out Google Translate is good for more than ordering pasta. Though I have to say, some of the things I've overheard have been quite educational. Francesca found her voice first. "How long?" 3 years. Since you started taking those mysterious work trips to Montreal. Since you began having those late-night phone conversations you thought I couldn't understand. Since you started treating me like I was invisible in my own home. The family exchanged glances. Giuseppe cleared his throat, but I wasn't finished. "I know about Vittorio," I said quietly. Francesca's wine glass slipped from her fingers, red wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. The stain grew larger in the silence, and I watched it expand with the same detached fascination I'd felt watching my marriage dissolve over the past year. "I think," I said, standing and placing my napkin on the table, "this is where I make my exit. Thank you for dinner, Maria. It was very illuminating. I walked to the door, feeling 15 pairs of eyes burning into my back. As I reached for my coat, I heard Francesca's voice, shaky and small. Leon, wait. I turned back to see her standing in the doorway, her perfect composure finally cracked. Behind her, the family sat frozen around the dining table like actors who'd forgotten their lines. We need to talk, she said. Yes, I agreed. We do, but not here. Not tonight. Tonight, I think you have some explaining to do to your family about why your convenient Canadian husband isn't quite as convenient as you thought. I stepped out into the cold November air, my breath forming clouds in the darkness. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe properly. The weight of pretending to be the clueless husband had lifted, replaced by something sharper and more dangerous. My phone buzzed with a text from Francesca. Please come home. Let me explain. I deleted it without responding and started walking toward my car. The real conversation could wait. First, I had some planning to do. The drive home gave me time to process what had just happened. 15 years of marriage, and I'd just blown it up with a few sentences in Italian. But as I pulled into our driveway, looking at the house we'd bought together when we still believed in forever, I realized the marriage had been dying long before tonight. I'd just finally stopped pretending otherwise. Francesca's BMW wasn't in the driveway when I got home, which meant she was either still at her parents' house dealing with the fallout, or she'd gone somewhere else to think. Knowing my wife, she was probably crafting a legal strategy. Immigration lawyers were good at that, finding loopholes, building cases, controlling narratives. Too bad for her, I'd learned a few things about strategy myself. I went straight to my home office and opened my laptop. Over the past 3 years, while learning Italian, I'd also been learning other skills: computer forensics, digital investigation, how to recover deleted files and trace digital footprints. Amazing what you could learn online when your wife thought you were just playing video games. The hidden phone I'd discovered 2 months ago was just the beginning. Francesca had been careful, but not careful enough. She'd used our shared laptop for some of her communications, thinking deleted browser history meant deleted evidence. She was wrong. Vittorio Benedetti, 53 years old, owner of 3 upscale Italian restaurants in Montreal, divorced twice, no children, and according to the recovered emails I'd found, Francesca's first love from her year abroad in Italy during college, the one who got away, the one who'd apparently decided he wanted her back. I scrolled through the recovered messages, my stomach churning at the intimate details. They'd reconnected at a legal conference in Montreal 18 months ago. What started as nostalgic drinks had become weekend trips, expensive gifts, and plans for a future that didn't include me. The worst part wasn't the affair itself. It was reading how they talked about me. Il povero Leon. Poor Leon. He has no idea, Francesca had written. He's so focused on his little computer business, he barely notices when I'm gone. My little computer business. The one that paid for her law school loans. The one that funded our mortgage and her expensive tastes. The one that had allowed her to take the pro bono cases that built her reputation while I handled the finances. My phone rang. Francesca. Leon, please. Where are you? Home, I said. Where you should be if you want to have this conversation. I'm coming home now. Don't do anything crazy, okay? We can work this out. Work this out. Like it was a scheduling conflict instead of a complete betrayal of everything we'd built together. I'll be here, I said, and hung up. I had maybe 20 minutes before she arrived. Time enough to make copies of everything I'd found and store them safely. I'd learned that lesson from watching too many movies where the evidence conveniently disappeared at crucial moments. While the files copied to an encrypted drive, I walked through our house with new eyes. The expensive artwork Francesca had bought on her work trips to Montreal. The jewelry she claimed was from grateful clients. The new lingerie I'd found in her dresser, tags still on, in sizes that actually fit her properly, unlike the gifts I'd been giving her for years. I'd been so blind. Or maybe I'd been willfully ignorant, choosing to believe her lies because the truth was too painful to face. The front door opened, and Francesca's heels clicked across the hardwood floor. She appeared in the doorway of my office, still wearing the black dress, but her perfect composure was gone. Her makeup was smudged, her hair escaping its bun. How long have you known? She asked. About Vittorio specifically? 2 months? About you cheating? Longer? She sank into the chair across from my desk. I never meant for this to happen. Which part? The affair or getting caught? Leon, please. I know you're angry. Angry? I laughed, and the sound surprised both of us. It wasn't a pleasant laugh. Francesca, I'm past angry. I'm in a whole different emotional territory now. What does that mean? I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Even disheveled and caught red-handed, she was beautiful. But for the first time in years, her beauty felt like a weapon she'd been using against me, instead of a gift we shared. It means I'm done being your convenient Canadian husband. It means I'm done being the furniture that pays the bills while you rebuild your life with someone else. It's not like that. Really? Because I have emails that suggest otherwise. I have hotel receipts, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases. I have a pretty clear picture of what it's like. Her face went pale. You've been spying on me. I've been investigating my wife's suspicious behavior. There's a difference. That's illegal. You can't use anything you found that way in court. And there it was. She was already thinking like a lawyer, already planning her defense, not apologizing, not trying to save our marriage, planning her legal strategy. Who said anything about court? I asked. Maybe I'm not interested in a legal battle. Maybe I'm interested in something more personal. What does that mean? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our neighborhood. Nice houses, nice families, nice normal lives built on trust and honesty. Things I'd thought I had until tonight. It means you've underestimated me for the last time, I said. You think I'm just some boring AITA guy who doesn't understand your sophisticated world? You think I'm too Canadian, too polite, too predictable to cause you any real problems? I turned back to face her. You're wrong. Leon, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. Because the man you married, the one who loved you enough to overlook your condescension and your family's disrespect and your complete lack of appreciation for everything I've sacrificed for this marriage, that man is gone. I do appreciate. Stop. The word came out harder than I intended. Just stop. We both know this marriage has been over for a long time. The only question now is how it ends. Francesca wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara further. What do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to learn that treating people like furniture eventually comes back to bite you. And I want you to discover just how inconvenient this convenient Canadian husband can be when he puts his mind to it. Are you threatening me? I smiled. And from her expression, it wasn't a reassuring smile. I'm promising you. You wanted to play games, Francesca. Congratulations. Game on. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange, cold détente. Francesca and I moved around each other like polite strangers sharing a hotel room. She slept in the guest bedroom, claiming she needed space to think. I let her have it, using the time to plan my next moves. She'd suspended her trips to Montreal, at least temporarily, but she was still texting with Vittorio, still taking calls she thought I couldn't understand. The difference was, now I was recording everything. My boxing coach, Big Mike, noticed the change in my training immediately. You're hitting different, he said after I'd spent 40 minutes pounding the heavy bag. Angrier, more focused. Big Mike was 65, built like a refrigerator, and had been running his gym in the warehouse district for 30 years. He'd seen every kind of anger that brought men to his gym, and he could read it like a diagnostic manual. Wife troubles, I said, unwrapping my hands. Figured. You want to talk about it? Not really. I want to hit things. Fair enough. But remember what I always tell you. The bag can't hit back. Real life is different. I'm not planning to hit anyone, Mike. Good, because the best revenge is living well, not catching attack charges. If only it were that simple. That afternoon, I drove to Montreal. Francesca thought I was visiting a client, which was technically true. I was investigating someone, which was close enough to consulting work for my conscience. Vittorio's flagship restaurant, Benedetti's, occupied a converted Victorian mansion in Old Montreal. Expensive cars lined the valet parking area, and well-dressed couples streamed through the ornate entrance. The kind of place Francesca loved, and I'd always felt underdressed in. I parked across the street and waited. After 2 hours, Vittorio emerged from a black Mercedes, tossing his keys to the valet with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never worried about money. He was handsome in that aging Italian playboy way. Silver hair, expensive suit, confident stride. Everything I wasn't. I followed him inside, claiming I was meeting friends for dinner. The hostess seated me at a corner table with a clear view of the dining room. Vittorio worked the room like a politician, stopping at tables to chat with customers, his smile never wavering. When he approached my table, I was ready. Enjoying your meal? He asked in accented English. Very much, I replied in Italian. The osso buco reminds me of a place I knew in Milan. His eyebrows rose slightly. You speak Italian well. Are you visiting from Italy? Canadian, I said. But my wife is Italian. She's actually from your area originally, Francesca Rossi, well, Francesca Turner now. The change in his expression was subtle but unmistakable. A tightening around his eyes, a slight pause before he smiled again. I don't think I know her, he lied smoothly. Really? That's strange. She mentioned meeting you at a legal conference. Said you knew each other years ago in Italy. Ah, yes, perhaps. I meet many people at these events. I'm sure you do. I'm Leon, by the way. Francesca's husband. Now his smile became fixed, artificial. Of course, how nice to meet you. Likewise, Francesca speaks of you often. She's quite fond of you. The conversation continued for another few minutes, both of us dancing around what we really wanted to say. He was smooth, I'd give him that. But he was also nervous, and that told me everything I needed to know. When I got home that night, Francesca was waiting in the living room with a glass of wine and what looked like a prepared speech. We need to talk about our future, she said. Okay, talk. I think we should consider a trial separation. Give each other some space to figure out what we really want. And what do you really want, Francesca? She looked down at her wine glass. I want to be happy. With Vittorio, I want to explore my options. Your options? I sat down across from her. That's an interesting way to put it. Very lawyerly. Leon, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder than what has to be? You cheating on me? You lying to me for over a year? You humiliating me in front of your family? I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me. Repeatedly. Deliberately. And now you want me to make it easy for you to continue hurting me by stepping aside gracefully. That's exactly what this is. You want me to agree to a separation so you can be with Vittorio without the inconvenience of being married. You want to keep your options open in case things don't work out with him. And you want me to be understanding about it. She was quiet for a long moment. What's the alternative? The alternative is that you learn there are consequences for your choices. The alternative is that you discover I'm not as convenient as you thought. You keep saying that. What does it mean? I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was walking her dog, living her normal, honest life. I envied her. It means I met your boyfriend today. Francesca's wine glass hit the coffee table hard enough to splash red wine onto the white upholstery. You what? Had dinner at his restaurant. Nice place. He's quite charming. We had an interesting conversation about you. Leon, you can't what? Can't go to a public restaurant? Can't introduce myself to my wife's lover? Can't have a friendly chat about mutual acquaintances? You're being ridiculous. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, you're the one being ridiculous. You're having an affair with a man who owns restaurants in Montreal, taking trips there every few weeks, spending money we don't have on clothes and jewelry to impress him. And somehow you think I'm the one being unreasonable. She stood up, her composure finally cracking completely. Fine. Yes, I'm seeing Vittorio. Yes, I have feelings for him. Yes, I want to see where it leads. Are you happy now? Ecstatic, I said. Now we can stop pretending. So what happens now? Now you move out. Tonight. This is my house too. Actually, it's not. Check the deed. Check who's been making the mortgage payments. Check who qualified for the loan. Her face went white. You can't do this. I can and I am. You want to explore your options? Go explore them. But you're not doing it from my house while spending my money. I'll fight you on this. Good luck. I'm sure Vittorio will be happy to pay your legal fees. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Not of me physically, but of what I might be capable of. Good. She should be afraid. You've changed, she said quietly. Yes, I agreed. I have. The question is, are you smart enough to figure out what that means before it's too late? Francesca moved out 3 days later, taking only her clothes and personal items. She found a furnished apartment downtown, close to her office, and conveniently located for trips to Montreal. I helped her pack, maintaining a polite facade that seemed to unnerve her more than anger would have. You're being very calm about this, she said as she folded her expensive dresses into suitcases. Why wouldn't I be? You're giving me exactly what I want, which is freedom to be myself without worrying about disappointing you. She paused in her packing. I never said you disappointed me. You didn't have to say it. You showed it every day for years. The first casualty of our separation was our social circle. Francesca moved quickly to control the narrative, reaching out to our mutual friends with her version of events. According to her story, we'd grown apart, wanted different things, decided to separate amicably. She painted herself as the sufferer of an emotionally distant husband who'd never really understood her. It was a good strategy. Most of our friends were couples, and couple friends instinctively side with the more social partner. Francesca had always been the one who organized dinner parties, remembered birthdays, maintained relationships. I was the quiet husband who showed up when required and faded into the background. The first affection came from our closest friends, Dave and Jennifer Morrison. Dave had been my best man. Jennifer was Francesca's college roommate. I'd expected them to try to stay neutral, maybe maintain separate friendships with both of us. Instead, I got a text from Dave. "Hey man, heard about you and Fran. Sorry it didn't work out. Probably better if we keep some distance while you guys sort things out." Translation: Jennifer had chosen Francesca, and Dave was following his wife's lead. Fair enough. I'd probably do the same thing in his position. But then I started hearing the stories Francesca was telling about our marriage, how I'd been controlling with money, how I'd refused to learn Italian despite her family's requests, how I'd been emotionally unavailable and unsupportive of her career. The irony was breathtaking. I was controlling because I'd managed our finances responsibly. I was unsupportive because I'd worked extra hours to pay for her unpaid internships and pro bono cases, and I'd refused to learn Italian, except I'd been secretly fluent for 3 years. The lies stung, but they also gave me ammunition. 2 weeks after Francesca moved out, Dave called me. "Look, Leon, I know things are weird between us right now, but Jennifer's having a birthday party this weekend. Small thing, just close friends. We'd like you to come. Will Francesca be there?" "Yeah, but we figured you guys are adults. You can handle being in the same room for a few hours." I almost declined. The smart thing would be to avoid the drama. Let Francesca have our friends, start building a new social life. But I wasn't feeling particularly smart anymore. "Sure," I said. "I'll be there." The party was at the Morrisons' house, the same place where we'd celebrated New Year's Eve for the past 5 years. The same people were there. Our old crowd, the couples we'd vacationed with and shared countless dinners with. They all greeted me with careful politeness, the way you'd treat someone recently diagnosed with a contagious disease. Francesca arrived fashionably late, wearing a red dress I'd never seen before. She looked stunning, confident, like a woman who'd been liberated from an oppressive marriage. The group gravitated toward her naturally, drawn by her energy and charm. I nursed a beer in the corner, watching the social dynamics play out. This was Francesca's element. She was funny, engaging, the center of attention. I was the awkward ex-husband who'd shown up to make everyone uncomfortable. Then Jennifer started telling a story about their recent girls' trip to Montreal, and I perked up. "Francesca took us to this amazing restaurant," Jennifer gushed. "The owner was so charming, such a gentleman. He sent over champagne and everything." "Vittorio is a good friend," Francesca said smoothly. "He takes excellent care of his customers." "Is he single?" asked Sarah, another friend. "Because he was definitely flirting with you." Francesca laughed, but I caught the slight flush in her cheeks. "He's just Italian. They're naturally charming. You should totally go for it," Sarah continued. "You deserve some fun after everything you've been through." I set down my beer and joined the conversation. "Vittorio Benedetti?" I asked in Italian. "The one who owns 3 restaurants in Montreal?" The group turned to stare at me. Francesca's face went pale. "You speak Italian now?" Dave asked, confused. "I've been learning," I said, switching back to English. "Thought it might help me understand my wife better. Turns out it did." Jennifer looked between Francesca and me, sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. "How do you know about Vittorio?" "I met him a few weeks ago. Had dinner at his restaurant. Interesting man. Very charming, like you said. He and Francesca have quite a history together." "Leon," Francesca warned quietly. "What kind of history?" Sarah asked, her gossip radar fully activated. "They knew each other in Italy," I said. "College sweethearts, actually. First love and all that. Quite romantic, really." The room went quiet. I could see the wheels turning in everyone's heads, connecting dots they hadn't realized were there. "Wait," Jennifer said slowly. "You knew him before the restaurant?" Francesca's composure was cracking. "It's not a big deal. We reconnected at a conference 18 months ago," I supplied helpfully. "Right around the time you started taking all those weekend trips to Montreal. What a coincidence." Leon, stop, Francesca said, her voice sharp with panic. But I was just getting started. Did you know, I continued conversationally, that Francesca speaks Italian beautifully? You should hear her talk about her marriage. Very entertaining, very honest. What are you doing? Dave asked, uncomfortable with the tension. I'm sharing some things I've learned recently. For instance, did you know that Francesca thinks I'm like furniture? Useful furniture that pays taxes and fixes the Wi-Fi, but furniture nonetheless. The silence was deafening. Francesca looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. She said that? Jennifer asked, her loyalty to Francesca warring with her shock. In Italian, at her parents' house, along with several other colorful observations about our marriage and my shortcomings. Very illuminating evening. Leon, please, Francesca whispered. Please. What? Please stop telling the truth? Please continue pretending to be the emotionally distant husband while you play the sufferer? Please keep letting you control the narrative about our marriage? I looked around the room at our former friends, seeing their carefully neutral expressions shifting into something more complicated. Here's what really happened, I said. Francesca reconnected with her college boyfriend at a conference. She's been having an affair with him for over a year. She's been lying to all of us about her trips to Montreal, her sudden interest in expensive clothes, her complete emotional withdrawal from our marriage. And when I finally called her on it, she decided I was the problem. Is this true? Jennifer asked Francesca directly. Francesca's silence was answer enough. Jesus, Fran, Dave muttered. Why didn't you just get divorced? It's complicated, Francesca said weakly. It's really not, I replied. She wanted to keep her options open, wanted to see if things would work out with Vittorio before burning bridges with her convenient Canadian husband. I finished my beer and set the empty bottle on the table. Thanks for the party, Jennifer. Happy birthday. I think I'll head home now. As I walked to the door, I could hear the explosion of conversation behind me. Francesca was trying to explain, but the damage was done. Her carefully crafted sufferer narrative had just collapsed in front of our entire social circle. It felt good, better than I'd expected. My phone buzzed with a text as I got to my car. It was from Jennifer. We need to talk, soon. I smiled and started the engine. The war was just beginning. The fallout from Jennifer's party was swift and brutal. Within days, I was getting calls and texts from friends who'd initially sided with Francesca. Jennifer had apparently done some investigating of her own, and what she'd found had shifted the entire narrative. I feel like such an idiot, she told me over coffee. She played us all, made us think you were this cold, distant husband when she was the one having an affair. She's very good at controlling narratives, I said. Comes with the lawyer training. Dave feels terrible. We all do. Is there anything we can do? Just be honest with people about what really happened. I don't need anyone to take sides, but I'm tired of being painted as the villain. But I was lying. I did want people to take sides. I wanted Francesca to feel the same isolation and betrayal I'd felt. I wanted her to understand what it was like when your support system crumbled. The real problem, though, was Vittorio. As long as he was in the picture, Francesca had somewhere to run, someone to comfort her and validate her choices. Someone who made her feel like the sufferer of a failed marriage instead of the architect of its destruction. I needed to remove him from the equation. My opportunity came sooner than expected. Sophia, Francesca's younger sister, called me on a Thursday evening. Leon, can we talk? Privately? We met at a coffee shop downtown, away from the Italian district where everyone knew everyone. Sophia looked nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder like she was afraid of being seen. I need to tell you something, she said. About Vittorio. I'm listening. He's not what Francesca thinks he is. He's not what any of us think he is. She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of photos. Vittorio at various restaurants and clubs, always with different women. Young women, mostly. Some looked barely legal. My friend works at one of the hotels in Montreal, Sophia explained. She's seen him there with different women all the time, even recently while he's been with Francesca. Does Francesca know? I tried to tell her, but she won't listen. She says I'm jealous, that I don't understand their relationship. Sophia's voice was bitter. She's so convinced he's her soulmate, her second chance at happiness. Why are you telling me this? Sophia looked down at her coffee. Because I love my sister. But she's making a huge mistake, and because you don't deserve what she's doing to you. You've always been good to our family, even when they didn't appreciate it. What do you want me to do with this information? I don't know. But I thought you should know the truth about who she's throwing her marriage away for. I studied the photos more carefully. In one of them, Vittorio was kissing a blonde who couldn't have been older than 25. In another, he had his arm around a brunette at what looked like a private party. The dates on the photos spanned the past 6 months, well into his relationship with Francesca. Can your friend get more information? Names, dates, details? Sophia nodded. She keeps records. Hotel policy. But Leon, what are you planning? I'm planning to give my wife the truth about her soulmate. What she does with it is up to her. But I was already thinking beyond just telling Francesca. Information was power, and I was starting to understand just how much power I'd been giving away by being the nice guy, the understanding husband, the convenient furniture. That weekend, I drove to Montreal again. This time, I wasn't going to Benedetti's restaurant. I was going to his home. Vittorio lived in a converted warehouse in the trendy Plateau district. Expensive cars filled the private parking garage, and the building screamed money and exclusivity. I parked across the street and waited. At 10 p.m., Vittorio's Mercedes pulled into the garage. He wasn't alone. The blonde from Sophia's photos was in the passenger seat, laughing at something he'd said. They disappeared into the building together. I waited until midnight, then walked to the parking garage. The security was minimal, a keypad entry and a few cameras that were more for show than actual surveillance. I'd learned a lot about security systems in my IT work, including how easily most of them could be bypassed. It took me 15 minutes to get into the garage and locate Vittorio's Mercedes. Beautiful car, probably worth more than I made in a year. The kind of car that said, successful, sophisticated, better than you. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The license plate, the interior, the small details that would prove I'd been there. Then I opened the glove compartment. Jackpot. Insurance papers, registration, and a small notebook filled with phone numbers and names. Female names with ratings next to them. Francesca was in there. FR, 8/10. Good for long-term, useful connections. I photographed everything, then put it all back exactly as I'd found it. As I was about to leave, I noticed something else. A small bag tucked under the passenger seat. I pulled it out carefully. Cocaine. Not a lot, just a few grams, but enough to cause serious problems for a restaurant owner if the police found it during a routine search. I put the bag back and left the garage, my mind racing. This was bigger than just an affair. Vittorio wasn't just a cheating boyfriend. He was a pill user who rated women like wine and saw Francesca as a useful connection rather than a soulmate. The question was, what was I going to do with this information? Back home, I spread the photos across my desk and started planning. I could go to Francesca directly, show her the evidence, hope she'd see reason, but she was so invested in her fantasy of Vittorio as her salvation that she'd probably find ways to rationalize it. Or I could be more strategic. I picked up my phone and called Sophia. It's Leon. How would you feel about helping me save your sister from making the biggest mistake of her life? What do you need me to do? I need you to get Francesca to Montreal this weekend. Tell her you want to see this amazing man she's been talking about. Make it seem like you're finally supportive of their relationship. And then what? Then we show her who Vittorio really is. Not by telling her, but by letting her see for herself. There was a long pause. Leon, this sounds dangerous. The only thing dangerous here is letting Francesca destroy her life for a man who sees her as a conquest. Are you willing to help me or not? Yes, Sophia said quietly. I'm in. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for Vittorio to walk into it. Sophia played her part perfectly. She called Francesca on Friday morning, gushing about how she'd been thinking about what Francesca had said about finding happiness and taking chances. She wanted to meet Vittorio, to see this wonderful man who'd brought such joy back into her sister's life. Francesca was suspicious at first. Sophia had been notably unsupportive of the relationship, but eventually agreed to bring her to Montreal for the weekend. They'd have dinner at Benedetti's on Saturday night, then spend Sunday exploring the city. I drove to Montreal separately, arriving Saturday afternoon. I'd booked a room at the same hotel where Sophia's friend worked, and she'd already provided me with crucial intelligence. Vittorio had a reservation for Sunday brunch with a 23-year-old named Chloe, the same blonde I'd seen him with at his apartment. The plan was simple, but required precise timing. Sophia would keep Francesca busy Saturday night and Sunday morning, then suggest they surprise Vittorio with an impromptu visit for Sunday brunch. They'd arrive at the restaurant just as he was settling in with his other girlfriend. Saturday night, I positioned myself across the street from Benedetti's with a clear view of the entrance. At 8 p.m., Francesca and Sophia arrived in a taxi. Francesca looked radiant. She was wearing another new dress, her hair perfectly styled, her face glowing with happiness. She looked like a woman in love, and for a moment, I almost felt guilty about what I was planning to do. Then I remembered the useful furniture comment, and the feeling passed. Vittorio greeted them at the entrance with his usual charm, kissing Francesca passionately and embracing Sophia like they were old friends. He led them inside, playing the perfect host, the devoted boyfriend, the man who'd rescued Francesca from her boring Canadian marriage. I waited until they were seated, then called Sophia's phone. "Are you in position?" I asked when she stepped away to take the call. "Yes, he's being incredibly charming. Francesca is completely smitten." "Good, remember, tomorrow at 11:30. The reservation is under his name." "Leon, are you sure about this? She's going to be devastated." "She's already devastated. She just doesn't know it yet. Better she finds out now than after she's destroyed her entire life." Sunday morning came gray and drizzly, typical Montreal autumn weather. I was already in position at a cafe across from the restaurant where Vittorio was meeting Chloe. At 11:15, his Mercedes pulled up and he stepped out, looking around nervously before heading inside. 5 minutes later, Chloe arrived in a taxi. Young, beautiful, completely infatuated as Vittorio stood to greet her with the same passionate kiss I'd seen him give Francesca the night before. At 11:30 exactly, another taxi pulled up. Francesca and Sophia stepped out, Francesca practically bouncing with excitement at the prospect of surprising her lover. I held my breath as they walked toward the restaurant entrance. The explosion was visible even from across the street. Francesca stopped dead in the doorway, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and devastation in the space of seconds. Sophia grabbed her arm, whether to support her or prevent her from fleeing, I couldn't tell. Vittorio looked up and saw them, his face going white. He said something to Chloe, who turned to look at the two women in the doorway with obvious confusion. Then Francesca was moving, striding toward their table with the focused intensity of a lawyer approaching a hostile witness. I couldn't hear what she said, but I could see the gestures, the pointing, the way Chloe's face shifted from confusion to understanding to anger. Vittorio was trying to manage both women, his hands raised in a placating gesture that satisfied neither. Other diners were starting to stare as voices rose and the drama unfolded. Then Francesca slapped him. The sound carried even across the street, sharp and final. Chloe threw her napkin at Vittorio and stormed out. Francesca said something else, probably in Italian, probably not complimentary, and followed her out, Sophia close behind. I watched Vittorio sit alone at the table, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. The other diners were whispering, phones were coming out to record the aftermath. His reputation, his image as the sophisticated restaurateur, was being destroyed in real time. My phone buzzed. "Sophia, it's done. She saw everything. We're going back to the hotel." I waited another hour before going to their hotel. I found them in the lobby bar, Francesca staring into a glass of wine, while Sophia rubbed her shoulders consolingly. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. Francesca looked up, her eyes red with tears and rage. "What are you doing here?" "Sophia called me, thought you might need a ride home." "You planned this?" It wasn't a question. "I helped Sophia show you the truth about your soulmate. What you do with that truth is up to you." "You had no right." "I had every right. You're still my wife, legally anyway. And despite everything you've done, I didn't want to see you destroy your life for a man who thinks of you as a useful connection." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo of Vittorio's notebook, zooming in on her entry. 8 out of 10. Good for long-term, useful connections. That's how your great love sees you, Francesca. You're a conquest with benefits. She stared at the photo, her face crumpling. "How did you get this? Does it matter? The point is, this is who you threw our marriage away for. A man who rates women like restaurants and keeps a backup girlfriend for when you're not available." "I loved him," she whispered. "No, you loved the idea of him. You loved the fantasy of recapturing your youth, of being with someone who made you feel special and sophisticated. But the man you actually loved doesn't exist." Sophia squeezed her sister's hand. "Leon's right, Fran. I tried to warn you, but you wouldn't listen." Francesca was quiet for a long time, staring into her wine. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and broken. "What happens now?" "Now you decide what kind of person you want to be," I said. "You can keep playing the sufferer, blaming everyone else for your choices, or you can take responsibility for what you've done and try to figure out how to move forward. Do you think we could ever—" "No." The word came out harder than I intended, but I didn't soften it. What we had is gone. You killed it. But that doesn't mean your life is over. It just means you have to build a new one based on truth instead of fantasy. I stood up and put a 20 on the table for their drinks. Sophia, your sister needs you right now. Be there for her. And Francesca? Next time you want to reinvent your life, try doing it honestly. It hurts less in the long run. As I walked away, I heard Francesca start to cry deep, wrenching sobs that spoke of genuine grief and regret. Part of me wanted to go back to comfort her, to try to salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But that part of me was getting smaller every day, replaced by something harder and less forgiving. The convenient Canadian husband was truly dead. What was emerging in his place was someone I was still getting to know, someone who was just getting started. The aftermath of Montreal was swift and merciless. By Monday, word had spread through the Italian community about Francesca's public humiliation at the restaurant. The story grew in the telling. By the time it reached her parents, Vittorio had been caught with multiple women and had been thrown out of his own restaurant. Francesca returned to Toronto looking like she'd aged 5 years in one weekend. She moved back into our house without asking, sleeping in the guest room and moving through the space like a ghost. I didn't object. Seeing her broken and humiliated was more satisfying than I'd expected. But I wasn't done yet. The problem with Francesca was that she'd always been able to recover from setbacks by reinventing the narrative. She was a lawyer, trained to find angles and arguments that shifted blame and responsibility. Give her enough time, and she'd find a way to make herself the sufferer again. The woman who'd been deceived by a charming sociopath, who'd been driven to infidelity by an emotionally distant husband. I couldn't let that happen. On Wednesday, I got a call from Dave Morrison. Hey man, Jennifer and I were talking, and we think maybe we should all get together. Clear the air, start fresh. What did you have in mind? Dinner party, this Saturday, just the old crowd. Francesca's been through hell, and you guys are trying to work things out, right? Maybe we can help? I almost laughed. Francesca had clearly been making the rounds, rebuilding her support network, preparing her comeback story. She was probably painting herself as the repentant wife who'd made a mistake and learned from it, who wanted to rebuild her marriage with her understanding husband. Sure, I said. That sounds great. Really, you're okay with this? Dave, I'm looking forward to it. Saturday night arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual. I wanted to look like a man who was in control, who was making deliberate choices, rather than just reacting to events. Francesca emerged from the guest room wearing a conservative black dress and minimal makeup. She looked contrite, humble, like a woman who'd learned hard lessons and was ready to rebuild her life on a foundation of honesty. It was a good performance. The dinner party was at the Morrisons' house again, but the atmosphere was different this time. Everyone was trying too hard to be normal, to pretend that the previous month of drama hadn't happened. They greeted Francesca with careful warmth and me with cautious friendliness. Jennifer had prepared Francesca's favorite meal, ossobuco with risotto. The wine was expensive, the conversation carefully steered toward neutral topics. It felt like a wake for our old life, everyone pretending the corpse wasn't in the room. Halfway through dinner, Sarah brought up the elephant in the room. So, are you guys working things out? She asked with the bluntness of someone who'd had too much wine. Francesca reached for my hand across the table. We're trying. I made some terrible mistakes, hurt the person I love most, but Leon's been incredibly patient with me. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, Jennifer added supportively. It does, I agreed. It also takes courage to tell the whole truth. Something in my tone made Francesca's smile falter slightly. I continued, it would be easy to just focus on the affair, to make it seem like that was the only problem. But that wouldn't be honest, would it, Francesca? Leon, she said quietly, a warning in her voice. No, I think our friends deserve the whole truth. They've been caught in the middle of this mess, forced to choose sides based on incomplete information. That's not fair to them. What are you talking about? Dave asked. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. I want to play something for you. It's a recording I made a few weeks ago. Francesca, you might recognize it. Her face went white. You can't. Actually, I can. It's my house, my phone, my recording equipment. And these are my friends, too. I pressed play. Francesca's voice filled the room, speaking in Italian with another woman, Lucia, her friend from law school who'd been helping her strategize the divorce. The key is making sure he looks like the bad guy, Francesca was saying. If I can show that he was controlling and emotionally abusive, I can get more in the settlement. But was he actually abusive? Lucia asked. Not physically, but emotional misuse is harder to prove anyway. Who's to say what counts? He managed all the money, made me ask permission for purchases. He was cold, distant, unsupportive of my career. What about the affair? That's why we have to be careful. I was driven to it by his neglect. I was lonely, vulnerable. Vittorio offered me the emotional connection I wasn't getting at home. I paused the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. Should I translate for those who don't speak Italian? I asked conversationally. Or did you get the general idea? Jennifer was staring at Francesca with horror. You were planning to lie about Leon being abusive? It's not that simple, Francesca started. It's exactly that simple, I interrupted. You were going to destroy my reputation, claim I was abusive, take half of everything I'd worked for, and paint yourself as the sufferer, all while continuing your affair with a man who saw you as a useful connection. I pressed play again. The recording continued with Francesca discussing strategy, talking about which friends she could count on for support, how to present herself as the wronged party. The Italian community will support me, her voice said. They already see him as an outsider. If I play this right, he'll be completely isolated. Dave was shaking his head. Jesus, Fran, what were you thinking? I was thinking about survival, Francesca said, her composure finally cracking completely. I was thinking about protecting myself from a man who'd been lying to me for years. Lying to you? Sarah asked. He spoke Italian. For 3 years, he listened to private conversations, spied on me, pretended to be something he wasn't. I learned a language, I said calmly. You had an affair and planned to frame me for misuse. I'm not sure those are equivalent. You manipulated everything, Montreal, the restaurant, all of it. I showed you the truth about your boyfriend. You manipulated our entire social circle into thinking I was an emotionally abusive husband. The room erupted in arguments, everyone talking at once. Jennifer was demanding explanations from Francesca. Dave was asking me why I hadn't told them about the recording sooner. Sarah was trying to mediate while clearly being fascinated by the drama. I stood up and walked to the window, letting the chaos swirl around me. Outside, the street was quiet and normal, other families having their own Saturday night dinners without the benefit of secretly recorded conversations and public humiliations. When the noise died down, I turned back to the group. The truth is, I said, our marriage was over long before Vittorio came along. We'd grown apart, wanted different things, stopped communicating honestly. If Francesca had just asked for a divorce, we could have handled this like adults. But that wouldn't have been enough, Francesca said bitterly. You would have fought me on everything, made it as difficult as possible. Would I have? We'll never know, because you chose to lie and cheat instead of having an honest conversation. I picked up my phone and looked around the room at our former friends. I'm sorry you all got caught up in this. I'm sorry your dinner party turned into a courtroom drama. But I'm not sorry for defending myself against false accusations. What happens now? Jennifer asked quietly. Now Francesca and I get divorced. Honestly, this time without the character assassination and strategic manipulation. We divide our assets fairly, go our separate ways, and try to rebuild our lives without destroying each other in the process. I looked at Francesca, who was staring down at her hands. Unless you have any other recordings or revelations you'd like to share with the group? She shook her head without looking up. Good, then I think we're done here. I walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Francesca? Next time you want to have a private conversation about destroying your husband's reputation, you might want to make sure he doesn't understand every word you're saying. The silence followed me all the way to my car. The divorce proceedings began the following week. Without the false misuse allegations and character assassination strategy, it was a relatively straightforward process. We divided our assets, sold the house, and went through the motions of ending a 15-year marriage with lawyers and paperwork. Francesca moved back in with her parents temporarily, her career damaged by the scandal, but not destroyed. She was still a competent immigration lawyer, even if her personal judgment had proven questionable. She'd survive, rebuild, eventually find someone else to blame for her mistakes. But I wasn't quite finished with her yet. The final piece of my revenge required patience and perfect timing. I waited until the divorce was finalized, until Francesca had started to rebuild her confidence and her reputation. She'd begun dating again, Nothing serious, just casual dinners with men from her professional circles. She was being careful this time, or at least more discreet. Then I made my move. The annual Italian-Canadian Cultural Festival was the biggest event in the community calendar. Hundreds of people attended, including local politicians, business leaders, and journalists. It was where reputations were made and unmade, where the community's power structure was displayed and reinforced. Francesca would be there, of course. She served on the organizing committee and had helped plan the event for years. It was her chance to show the community that she'd weathered the storm, that she remained a respected member of their society. I'd never attended before. The convenient Canadian husband had always found excuses to avoid community events where he'd be ignored or condescended to. But this year was different. This year, I had something to say. I arrived early and found the event coordinator, a woman named Maria Santini who'd known Francesca's family for decades. "I'd like to make a donation to the Cultural Center," I told her in perfect Italian. "A substantial one. And I'd like to say a few words about the importance of preserving Italian culture and values." Maria was delighted. Large donations were always welcome, and having a non-Italian speak about the importance of their culture would look good for the community's integration efforts. "Of course, we'd be honored to have you speak. How substantial a donation are we talking about?" I named a figure that made her eyes widen. It was most of what I'd gotten from the sale of the house, money I'd been planning to use to start over somewhere new. But revenge required sacrifice. "Madonna mia," she breathed. "Yes, absolutely. We'll put you on the program right after the mayor's speech." The festival was held in a large community center decorated with Italian flags and banners. The smell of garlic and olive oil filled the air, and traditional music played from speakers set up around the room. It was exactly the kind of event I'd avoided for 15 years, full of people who'd never quite accepted me as anything more than Francesca's Canadian husband. Tonight, that was going to change. I spotted Francesca across the room wearing an elegant blue dress and talking animatedly with a group of women from the organizing committee. She looked confident, relaxed, like a woman who'd put her troubles behind her. When she saw me, her face tightened with surprise and concern. The speeches began at 8 p.m. The mayor talked about diversity and cultural enrichment. The president of the Cultural Center thanked the sponsors and volunteers. Then Maria took the microphone. "Our next speaker has made an extraordinarily generous donation to our Cultural Center," she announced. "Leon Turner has asked to share some thoughts about the importance of preserving Italian culture and values in our community." I walked to the podium, feeling hundreds of eyes on me. Francesca was staring at me with obvious alarm, probably wondering what I was planning to say. I adjusted the microphone and looked out at the crowd. "Buonasera," I began in Italian. "Good evening, friends." A murmur went through the crowd. Most of them had never heard me speak Italian before. "I want to talk to you tonight about truth," I continued, "about the importance of honesty in preserving not just our culture, but our community." Francesca was moving toward the side of the room, probably looking for an exit or trying to get someone to cut off my speech. But Maria was beaming at my fluent Italian, and the crowd was listening intently. "For 15 years, I was married to one of your daughters," I said, "Francesca Rossi Turner. Many of you know her, respect her, consider her a pillar of this community." The murmur grew louder. This wasn't the cultural appreciation speech they'd been expecting. "During those 15 years, I learned your language, your customs, your values. I learned about the importance of family, of loyalty, of keeping your word. Beautiful values that I tried to embrace and live by." I paused, letting the tension build. "I also learned that some people use these values as a mask. They speak about family while betraying their spouses. They talk about loyalty while planning betrayals. They claim to value honesty while building their lives on lies." Francesca had reached the side of the room and was gesturing frantically at Maria, trying to get her to stop the speech. But Maria was frozen, unsure what to do with a major donor who was clearly going off script. "Some of you may have heard about the end of my marriage," I continued. "You may have been told that I was a cold husband, emotionally distant, unsupportive of my wife's career and culture. You may have been told that my wife was driven into the arms of another man by my neglect and indifference." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "These are lies," I said simply. "Carefully constructed lies designed to protect a woman who chose to have an affair rather than work on her marriage, who chose deception over honesty, manipulation over communication. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the sound system. "I'd like to share with you some recordings I made," I said. "Conversations in Italian that my wife had with her friends, thinking I couldn't understand them. Conversations about how to destroy my reputation, how to claim I was abusive, how to turn this community against me." "Stop!" Francesca's voice cut through the silence. She was pushing through the crowd toward the stage. "You can't do this!" "Actually, I can," I replied calmly. "These recordings were made in my own home with my own equipment, and I think this community has a right to know the truth about the woman they've been supporting." I pressed play. Francesca's voice filled the room, speaking in Italian about her strategy for the divorce, her plans to claim emotional misuse, her dismissive comments about the stupid Canadians who would believe her sufferer story. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps, angry muttering, people turning to stare at Francesca with shock and disgust. The Italian community valued many things, but honesty and respect for marriage were at the top of the list. "Please," Francesca was saying, having reached the front of the crowd, "let me explain." But I wasn't finished. I played more recordings, her conversations with Vittorio, laughing about my ignorance of their affair, her discussions with Lucia about which community members could be manipulated to support her story, her casual dismissal of our marriage as a convenient arrangement that had outlived its usefulness. By the time I stopped the recordings, Francesca was in tears and the crowd was in an uproar. People were shouting questions, demanding explanations, expressing their outrage at being manipulated and lied to. I waited for the noise to die down, then spoke into the microphone one last time. "I want you to understand," I said, "that I'm not sharing this to hurt Francesca or to seek revenge. I'm sharing it because this community deserves the truth. You welcomed me into your families, your traditions, your celebrations. You treated me with respect and kindness even when I was just the quiet Canadian husband in the corner." I looked directly at Francesca, who was standing frozen in the middle of the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "You taught me about honor," I continued, "about keeping your word, protecting your family, standing up for what's right. These are beautiful values, and I'm grateful to have learned them, even if not everyone in this room has chosen to live by them." I disconnected my phone from the sound system and stepped back from the microphone. "Thank you for listening," I said, "and thank you for teaching me that sometimes the most Italian thing you can do is refuse to let someone make a fool of you." The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, someone started clapping. An old man in the back, one of the community elders, who'd always treated me with quiet respect. Others joined in until half the room was applauding. The other half was staring at Francesca with expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust. I walked off the stage and headed for the exit, feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of conversation, the angry questions directed at Francesca, the complete collapse of her carefully rebuilt reputation. As I reached the door, I heard Maria's voice on the microphone, trying to restore order, thanking me for my generous donation and honest words. I stepped out into the cold night air and walked to my car, leaving behind the wreckage of Francesca's second attempt at reinvention. This time there would be no comeback. The community that had been her source of strength and identity had heard her true voice, her real opinions about them and their values. She was truly alone now, with no one left to blame but herself. I started the engine and drove away from the community center, away from the Italian district, away from the life I'd built and destroyed and rebuilt again. In my rearview mirror, I could see people streaming out of the building, their animated conversations visible in the parking lot lights. By tomorrow, everyone would know the truth. The convenient Canadian husband had had the last word after all. For the first time in years, I smiled with genuine satisfaction. The game was over, and I had won.